So I have this really old film camera that I made for Rust 5 years ago. Every now and then I look over old artwork, wondering how I could improve on it if I had the chance to today. Because no doubt I'll look back and see a load of issues that I know I could fix and make it look 100 times better. Not that these changes will necessarily transfer to Rust, but it's a nice little challenge I set for myself, like an exercise of self-reflection after a few years. And so here is the film camera from Rust, now in Marmoset Toolbag 4. My goal? Well, at the moment I just want to look over the asset itself and re-UV it. Ultimately, I'd like to retexture it too. Hopefully this video will help others to improve their UVing and to also go back to projects and improve on them. So let's have a look in Blender. So we're just going to import it in, and it is absolutely massive. Let's just fix this so it's a bit more of a realistic scale. And I'm just looking around and I forgot how I made the geometry, and so I'm just investigating it really. And I mean, it is what it is. It's 5 years old. I could obviously improve it now and put in a lot more detail, but the thing is, when I first made this, I had it in mind that it was going to be relatively quite small, so I didn't really care too much about the details, and in the object itself there isn't all that much geometry anyway to constitute too much detail. It would be quite costly otherwise. I actually don't know the triangle count for this. I never actually checked. So I've applied the materials and I'm just going to look for some nice HDRIs. I actually use the Studio Tomoko from Substance Painter in Blender, which gives a nice result. I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm just making a new save file here, just so I don't lose any progress. So I think we should probably look at the UV of this, because I'm kind of worried it's going to be terrible. Okay, here we go. Get rid of that image. Oh gosh, yep. See, yeah, this isn't good. There's so much space in between. I mean, that's okay. I mean, especially at lower resolutions, it gives a lot more breathing room for padding and bitmapping. Yeah, the normals are just horrible. I think I had one smoothing group for it all. It was originally done in 3ds Max. Okay, let's do some organization. I can't not do this. I actually use a custom plugin to rename the data name, so it copies the mesh name and pastes it into the data name, so it's all nice. So yeah, I mean, looking at the seams now, there's so many things that I've done wrong here. Like, I really needed to connect these edges up, these seams up, because it's a hard edge. And so what I'm going to do now is basically just go around and separate a bunch of stuff. I think I had an issue there where it was just lagging a little bit, so I had to reload it. Yeah, I didn't even put seams here. This is wild. This is blowing my mind. Not even around there. Gosh, I think I just sort of like let it fold out like a pelt, which for hard surface assets is not a good way to go at all. You just get loads of gradients in there, so it's better to go from 90 degrees, somewhere in between 45 and 90, anywhere more than 90 degrees, or below 90 degrees should I say, where you should start putting your seams in. Yeah, goodness me, no wonder there's so many gradients and issues here. I even check as well if the geometry is flat where it should be flat, and it's not. and that's a bit of a concern. I'm slowly growing to realise that there's going to be a lot of work involved in this, because when I do these reworks, it's not only a self-reflection for me, but it's to see where I was at, because you don't really know where you are at in the moment. Even now, I don't really know where I'm at, but I know that I'm better than I was when I made this. I mean, it's just one of those things that it's one of the reasons why I do this, so I can go back and just sort of see where I'm actually at now. Because I don't really always like to compare myself against other people, because that can be quite depressing and quite motivating at the same time. It's a weird one. Now, I was a bit confused what to do with this, because it's not quite 90-degree angles. This edge loop is, obviously, but I was a bit unsure, so it's a bit of testing here, really. Because the angles, apart from that one that I mentioned, aren't exactly 90 degrees, but you won't see that seam there anyway, so it's probably worth doing that there. And again, not even flat. Let's fix that. You may have realised as well it's all triangulated, and that's because I've just imported the game mesh, I think it was, or it was a bake mesh that I added that was triangulated upon export. Pretty standard, don't have to do much with that. Now let's have a look at this twisty knob thing. I don't really like the knurling on it, honestly. What I would probably do in retrospect is have them sharper at the points and actually have them as geometry, because it's only 4 polygons per face, and if I were to make it now that you'd have in your hands, I would envision it as a first person asset, so I'd probably put a lot of more detail in there. Now, the question is, should I separate the lens in the UV from the rest of the camera body, because that would give me a lot of resolution, but the texture in itself, there's not a lot of detail in the asset, really, and as one material, it actually held up pretty nicely, honestly. So I'm not really sure it's all that necessary, to be honest, to have multiple UV sets and materials. Perhaps if it was a first person asset, but at the time it wasn't, and it isn't. I think it was just an asset that people can pick up and take screenshots, like a camera tool in Rust, I think. It's been a long time. So yeah, just going around here, and I'm noticing that there's it's pretty low poly here. So I'm going to detriangulate it and then add some geometry in, using the tries to quads method. What I'm going to do here now is just add some edge loops in it, and then I'm going to get the center of the ring here, and then I'm going to set the 3D cursor to the middle, and then use that as the point where I scale these new edge rings. There's probably a better way to do this, but I mean, I don't really want to remodel it. With these remakes, I suppose you could call it a remake, I want to do as the least work possible. It's more texture practice than anything. But actually, increasing the low poly triangle count will actually help with the end result quite a bit. And so I'm just playing with using loop tools that comes with Blender, just to see what it would look like to get a more even distribution of those edges, and it was kind of messing things up. I didn't really want to do that. Be as at least intrusive as possible with this. It's the same thing that I pretty much did with the military flamethrower I made. How long ago? Maybe a couple of years ago. I can't remember exactly now. And that was mostly a re-UV and retexture job. I did do I altered the high poly a little bit and some of the low poly, but minimal adjustments just to improve the entirety of it. And that seemed to work out really quite nicely, actually. So I'm pretty happy with that. Again, I think it's the same deal with that knurled ring there. I would have probably modelled that in. It would have increased the triangle count quite a lot, but maybe for a first-person weapon it would have looked really nice, but for a third-person item like that would be dropped on the floor like a world model mesh, I think this just being baked down is quite sufficient. I don't think at the time Marmoset had skew correction either. Maybe I would look at that as well. So what I'm doing now is just basically just straightening up the geometry, because it's really, really rough. I'm not sure what I did to create the low poly here. I'm thinking I probably used something like Topo Gun, just because of how uneven everything is. That is one of those things that you do have to be mindful of if you use something like Topo Gun to create your low poly mesh after you've made your high poly, is that you're not going to get like a straight mesh, 90-degree angles. You will have to do these adjustments afterwards. So I think I would, in hindsight, I would have reused the high poly, the subdivided mesh, and just taken off the subdivision modifier and removed all the edge loops, and I think it would have been a really good mesh to have used. Some gaps there, so I'm just going to close those gaps. See, it's even uneven on this edge as well. I really don't know what I was doing when I was UVing this. I think one of the things is that at the time I didn't really have anyone teaching me how to do things and improve, and I don't think that's a good enough excuse. I should have tried harder. I should have reached out to people to help me, because I think even though the result was good for the time, there's so many practices that I could have and should have known the proper ways to UV a hard surface asset like this. Because at the time I had no lead, no one over me, teaching me, guiding me or anything. It was just a real guessing game, really. Oh, I made a blunder here. I think I left weld verts on. At this point in time, honestly, I was just thinking, oh, let's just forget this project. But then I realised I can just separate it and it was fine. Honestly, I actually felt like I've done too much damage. That really ticks me off. I think if I were to optimize this, let's say I wasn't going to go for detail but more optimization, I think I wouldn't have bothered of separating out each segment like this. It would have been just one continuous mesh. So I wouldn't have those insets there. The lens and its hood would all be one cylindrical object, if that makes sense. Or that would be one. The camera is modelled after an OM2 Olympus film camera, which I have in my hands as I speak now. It was actually given to me as a wedding, not a wedding gift, a gift for taking photos for a friend's wedding, a friend of a friend's wedding. And they were photographers and they really liked stuff that I did, and they decided to give me this camera. So why not get that in Rust as well? So the way the film packaging on the inside, that's how it actually is, and even the positioning of it is exactly how it was on my camera that I have here as well. I obviously changed the name of it to Pantheon, and my initials for the OM2 and the MD, the bottom right. RW for RW2. Kind of stupid, but no one questioned it, so I was happy with that. I also baked down the tripod attachment hole at the bottom, which makes a lot of sense. If it's going to be so small on screen, you're not going to notice that. So again, just making sure that those typical hard surface seams are put in place. I'm questioning whether I should separate out the camera body into a different way than I already have done. Maybe separate the back from the front, but I might just be introducing unnecessary seams. So I'm just going to go around and just level everything basically, because I'm not happy with those uneven edges. So I'm pretty happy with this, I think. Let's have a look. Select everything and unwrap it. Oh gosh, look at that. Let's get rid of this material and create a new one for the new one. It's a little bit better. Right, so that's the camera body. Let's start straightening these parts out. I have a bunch, so I have a couple of UV tools. They're not all necessary to have, but because I have them, I might as well use them, you know. So the most useful tools I tend to just stick in my context quick favorites. Sometimes the straightening needs a little bit of manual work. So Zen UV has a really nice feature, which is Reshape Island, where you can grab a single edge of a strip and hit Reshape, and it should try and straighten it off that edge loop as best as possible. This is really good for like triangulated meshes like this. So let's try this now. There you go, boom, pretty good. if it's all quadded, I'd stick to using Straighten, which so the UV tools I have are Zen UV, UV Toolkit 2, and actually I think that's it. Apart from UV Packmaster, that's packing rather than actual UVing. And all of this you can actually just do with default vanilla Blender tools, but I think I just like the convenience of these tools. UV Toolkit 2 is kind of hard to come by because the author of the add-on no longer develops it and actually took it off his Gumroad for some strange reason. I'm not really too sure why. And Zen UV is just awesome, well worth the money. So this process can take a little bit of time, but it's worth it in the end. And the reason why we straighten these UVs as best as we can is really so that we have enough resolution in the UV, because I think in the end I'm going to go for a single UV pack. But if they're all curved around like this, one of the issues is that you're going to get some aliasing, because it's going to take up more. You're going to need more pixels to get the same resolution when it's a curved or diagonal. Not only that, but it'll take up more space in the UV pack because the bounding box is greater than just a square. So just making sure that these are straight. See, I'm not too sure about these. There's a couple of tricky ones that you'll notice yourself if you're doing this, which is where, even though you've put the seam in place on a cylindrical face, cylindrical strip of a UV, that it won't actually be separate, and no matter what you do, it won't actually unwrap. I think it might be this one actually. No, not that one. It won't even respond to the straighten tools. So I actually do come across this later on, but the best way to approach something like that is simply just to break it up into half, and then straighten each half, and then use the stitch tool and stitch it back together. So I have a preset that I made. I'm not really liking this at the moment because there's so much space left behind, and I really don't want to do too much work on this. I just want to create a better UV. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good, but I feel like, I play with the idea, well, what if I split it off? Will that give me a better pack? Maybe if I increase the lens, that would help with the space. But nothing really worked all that well, honestly, apart from what you'll see later on, where what you can do is the segments that fill the entire width or height of the UV space, we leave those as is, and then we use a tool in UV Packmaster called Pack to Others, where we have a selection. So we leave the UV islands that basically span the entire width or height of the UV pack. We leave those alone, and then everything else we pack to that remaining space, so it fills it up. That's good because it uses more space of the UV. We don't get anything left over. But one of the issues is that it'll have a mismatch in texel density, and that's not really a good idea, honestly, especially for something that is as generic as this camera. Really, it's a world model. You shouldn't really be worried about that. if it's a first person weapon, or I say weapon, first person item, then that's a different story, really, because you could justify that based on what's in view. I think if I remember correctly as well, I'm pretty sure I had these loops here that you see on the side. They aren't unique on either side because they exist on both sides. I think I just UV'd one of them, baked down one of them, and then just mirrored it. So this is the strip that I was talking about actually, where using any of the straightening tools it just wouldn't work. So what I'm going to do is, yeah, this is kind of blowing my mind because there is a seam there at the bottom in the middle. So my solution is to break it off and then do it, and then average it out, and then stitch it back together, and then straighten it. Voila, fixed. See, honestly, the UV pack isn't that bad. There's a lot of space left over, but I mean, it shouldn't matter all that much. Let's just fix a few things here. See, I'm just not happy with that empty space there. It's just nasty. See, I have enable heuristic enabled in UV Packmaster 2 with a search time of 60 seconds, and that will just run, the algorithm will just run for 60 seconds and try and find the most optimal pack. And what we have here is pretty good, but I'm just going to play with some settings with pixel margin and padding to see if we can improve things. But I don't think we're going to get incredible results. One of the things that when I'm thinking of when I'm UVing a hard surface asset like this is I want the least amount of gradation in my normal maps as possible, because one of the reasons for this is that for Rust, for example, almost everything has a world model because everything can be dropped, which means everything's essentially most likely is going to have LODs. And so when you're making lower detail meshes of an asset with normals that have gradients in them, as soon as you move or remove geometry in that model to make it lower resolution, you're going to come into a lot of issues. And I've come across those before. It's really evident in the minicopter in Rust, I find. But here we are. I mean, that's pretty good. I do have a little bit of a different take on it in a little bit. I actually forget to set the UI back to the proper scaling for it. So if everything suddenly looks a lot smaller on screen, I'm sorry about that. It's just because I forgot to set the scale properly. I'm an idiot. But anyway, I'm just looking at packing everything for the lens in its own UV just to see what that's like, and as you can tell, it's not very good. But it's always worth just to experiment, just to see what's possible. Here I'm taking off some settings, adding some new ones, all sorts of stuff here. So what I'm doing now is I'm manually rotating to the right rotation, the right orientation, and then I think I turn off I turn on pre-rotation disable so that it doesn't turn them straight away, but I think I'm still getting issues with the orientation. Yeah, even then, like, some still come on, so I just turn it off altogether. And then I think, well, why not I just pack those? This is where I use that pack to others feature. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's possible I could do this, but is it the right way to do it? Probably not, no. So I thought, in the end, let's just have a look at what it's like for this one, see how bad it is. So this is it. It fills a space. Let's pack to others here, and that does it. Visually looks a lot better because it takes up a lot more space. But as you can see in the 3D view, the main body of the camera has a much lower texel density than the rest of everything else. And I just don't think that's the best way of doing things. So yeah, let's have another look at this with the UI actually at proper scale so you actually see things. So yeah, I think I'm gonna just pack everything in one UV. It works for the original asset, and we had a lot of detail in that anyway, and it works great. So I don't think we should change that. I think we should keep it the same. So let's just average everything out and then pack it. Oh, let's take off pack to others. Yeah, you know what? That's actually a lot better. It's making a lot more use of the UV space. There's a couple of outliers here which kind of annoy me. Let's just run that back again. Yeah, I'm okay with this, honestly. Yeah, let's just end that there and let's just have a look at the checker map. All nice and even. Oh, looks a bit odd here. I think it's just because it's completely mirrored there for some reason, somehow. By chance it looks like it's stretching, but there isn't. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, honestly. So one of the things that I noticed with this asset that was a little bit broken, I'm not really sure why, um, was the AO map. Let's just join these together first and let's just save that. Let's pop into Marmoset again and have a look, because you can see here that little white square on the like triangular part of the Pantheon hood thing, whatever that's called. And when you turn it, yeah, you can see it here. It's definitely the AO. It's pretty nasty. Let's just turn the AO off here. Yup, there we go. That's the AO is broken for some reason. Let's just have another look in Blender. Yeah, you can already see it. It just sticks out so much. And there as well, look. Yeah, that's pretty nasty. I'm not sure why that's happened, but when we rebake this out and texture it, it should be fixed. So quite a short video, but I just wanted to go over the UVs of this and talk about it. I think it's a healthy thing to do to go over old assets like this, because it's a really good chance for you to see where you're at now. It's incredibly cringeworthy, let me tell you, but a couple of things to take away. It helps you to develop methods of constructing feedback that is both helpful and necessary, and that can easily translate in other people's work if you're in that position to do so. Not only this, but it helps you be realistic about your own work, and also to help, and I think this is really quite important, to help you analyse work you're currently on. So, thank you for sticking around and watching this video. See ya!